Undiscovered Gems is a new series I've decided to start, which is going to be where I touch on an album that I feel has been overlooked over the past however many years since it's been out. This could be an album from whatever decade. If I feel as though it doesn't have the attention it deserves, then I'm going to include it. This isn't necessarily a classic review, but it's just an album that deserves way more ears than it's got, because I said so. Yeah. Hope you enjoy this idea and series, and if you do have any requests, leave them in the comments, because I may as well at least check them out if I haven't heard them, or if I have heard them and I feel as though, yes, this is something that I feel deserves more attention, then I will likely touch on it. But yeah, I'm starting this series off with Lori McKenna and The Bird and the Rifle. This is an album that has only grown on me over time, but the more time has passed since this album's release, which was 2016, not even that long ago, it's occurred to me that this actually really has gone ridiculously overlooked. Yeah, sure, country lovers, anyone that keeps tabs on country music these days probably will know this album, or have at least heard of Lori McKenna, but generally no, this album has not really seen much of a big crowd. Maybe because it's country music and most people just bypass country music and think, it's not really for me, so I'm not going to bother. But man, if I were to give you like a 5-album starter pack for country music, this would be in that top 5. The lyrics on this album are incredibly poignant throughout. Like, she is an incredible songwriter. I'm in awe of some of the lyrical themes on this album and the way she writes her songs. It's masterful at times. The way she sings as well is incredibly beautiful, at times very heartbreaking, but I don't really feel as though she ever lets it get to that point. Like, you can't really hear like the strain in her voice, or you can't really hear the emotions break through, but you know that there's a lot of pain in the way she's saying it, and I feel as though she's trying to hold it in and just keep it straight, like, nah, I can do this, I'm not gonna let my emotions get the best of me, I'm just gonna sing with all I possibly can. And you can hear that because her voice, oh man. Instrumentally, you're not getting anything really new here, but I do feel as though the production is immaculate, and the way these tracks sound, there's some great choruses, the way the instrumentals flourish, there's some nice arrangements throughout. I definitely feel as though it holds up to Lori's amazing songwriting. That is the one thing I could imagine people not really enjoying all that much, just in the same way as that Courtney Marie Andrews album, where they're both incredibly traditional in their sound, that they're not really doing anything new, but at the same time, it's not really that much of an issue when it comes to country music, especially considering the last time we wanted something new out this genre, we got fucking bro country. Like, I'm fine with traditional sounding music in this genre, particularly because of bro country. But yeah, from here I may as well go into the lyrics, because this is the powerhouse of the album. This is the one thing I've been excited to talk about, because tracks like Wreck Me and If Whiskey Were a Woman are incredibly heartbreaking. Especially If Whiskey Were a Woman, because that closing track really hits hard. But I may as well talk about Wreck Me first, because I feel like that's the starting point, and then it kind of all comes back together once you hit the closing track, If Whiskey Were a Woman. But Wreck Me is essentially a track there where Lori McKenna is just not really understanding what she's doing wrong, or what exactly is going on between these two people in this relationship. She doesn't know what's changed, she doesn't know if it's her, she doesn't know if it's him. But all she seems to be doing is just wrecking him and hurting him all the time, and she has no idea why. This essentially, for me, sets the tone for the album though, because you know that once you're hitting this track with this power of like emotions so early on, you're gonna keep getting that throughout, and you do. Always Want You is essentially self-explanatory here, as she's talking about how she's always wanting this person, but she writes it in an interesting way where she talks about all these different scenarios, these very different situations, and yet every single one of them end up coming back to how she always wants this person. It's Sunday, it's church day, she'll still be thinking about him. It's a drunken night out in the streets with your friends, it'll resort back to thinking about him. it's late at night, she can't sleep because she's thinking about him. Pretty obvious stuff, I suppose, but again, I do think delivery is important with this kind of thing because the way she sells these lyrics are very powerful. One thing about this album that I want to bring up though is that whiskey gets brought up regularly on this album, and you could say, well, yeah, it's country music, it always does, but every time it gets mentioned, it's never in a happy way. Like, it's always in reference to something incredibly sad or incredibly heartbreaking, like on this track, for example, or on the track The Bird and the Rifle. On this track, she's talking about how he's like this stubborn, dangerous rifle who's about to blow at any point, and yet she still finds herself like loving him no matter what. And she compares herself to the bird, who is, you know, kind of like staring out to the window and like singing all day, and the rifle like falls in love with the bird because of the beautiful voice that she has. But obviously a bird and the rifle are complete opposites. They're not compatible at all. You don't think of good things when you think of a bird and a gun. It usually ends badly, so she ends up leaving and he's left alone drinking his whiskey. Really interesting way to write a song, I think, and yeah, again, I just find her so compelling as a songwriter. Halfway Home, perfect example, and quite possibly one of the best songs of the decade. I will go as far as saying that. The lyrics on this song are godly. I believe this song is her referencing herself about how she's made a mistake, but it could also potentially be seen as her talking about someone else, perhaps her daughter or perhaps a friend of hers. But for the sake of the themes of this album and how she's essentially talking about her own heartbreak throughout, I'm gonna say it's probably her. Here she's talking about how a relationship or a date has gone very sour, and she's just reminding herself that, you know, you're worth way more than this. This is not how it's supposed to be. This is not how guys should be acting. If he was raised correctly, he would not be doing this. You may be falling for him easily, you may be thinking he's gonna save you, but he absolutely will not. In fact, he would have driven you home if he was a good type of guy, but instead you're here halfway home driving thinking about how shit it's gone. It's a very powerful song. I'm not doing it justice at all. I think you should absolutely listen to this as opposed to listening to me try and explain what this is about. But yeah, again, her delivery, her vocals on this song, the instrumentation as well, I think is fantastic here too. Just makes it for one of the best songs of 2016, and again, I think one of the best songs of the decade. Also on this album is Humble and Kind, which actually won a Grammy, but it wasn't her version, of course, because if it had won a Grammy, then this album wouldn't really be undiscovered. But she wrote this song, and then Tim McGraw covered it, although he didn't technically cover it because there wasn't anything to cover, but it's a cover song technically. So she wrote the song, he made a song out of it, out of those lyrics she wrote, but then a few months down the line she did a rendition of his version of her song, but it's technically not a cover because she wrote the song originally, but he did his own version and she covered his version. I've never known this to ever happen, but yeah, basically, it's a great song that won a Grammy, but Lori McKenna's version is slightly better than Tim McGraw's, I would say. Both songs are very good, but I think I just prefer her vocals in this instance. Like, I think this is more suited for a female singer, which isn't something I usually think about when it comes to music. Gender in music isn't really a thing I ever think about, really. But I do feel as though in this case it is suited for her voice more than it was his, but his song is good too. I just think in this context, in this album, with a lot of the lyrics being so like downbeat and a lot of reflection on her life and how things aren't currently going well, I think this is actually a nice track to place in the middle of the album, because it's like a little reminder that yes, you should still stay positive and be a good person and do good things for other people, even when things aren't doing so good for you. Honestly, it kind of sounds like something your mum would say, really, but I think the way she sings it with her very wise words and delivery, it really adds a lot to it. Unfortunately though, even with this positive message, the album ends off very sadly, as I've already mentioned before, unfortunately, with again the reference to whiskey here. Kind of circling back to that first track, because on that first track she was saying about how all she ever does is wreck that person, and on this final track she's saying that basically if whiskey were a woman, she'd be much better than she could ever be. The whiskey essentially provides more happiness to the man she loves than she could ever provide for him, which again is ridiculously painful. But throughout the song, she references other things that could also be a woman. So she mentions weed, sunrise, prayer, like all these things that bring him something that she can't. And none of these things would ever be like her because she's just not as good as these things. And it essentially just adds all these layers. Like it's really kind of heartbreaking to hear her say all this. And this is how the album ends off. It's actually really quite sad. Maybe this isn't for you if you don't want anything to make you sad. But yeah, for me, this is incredibly well written. The whole thing, the whole album is produced really well. Again, her vocals throughout are fantastic. I keep saying that, but I just want to bring that up in case if some things I've said don't interest you all that much, then at least remember that these tracks are performed and sung incredibly well, so you might even get something out of that. But yeah, this is one of the highlights of the decade for me, honestly, and I just feel as though it deserves more. It's an undiscovered gem, and I hope you check it out based on my recommendation. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoy this series idea. And yeah, let me know what you think of this album if you have heard it, and that'll do. We'll leave it there. Yeah, great album, phenomenal album, fantastic album. Have a good day. Goodbye. Thank you for watching. Goodbye. Have a good day. Bye.